Welcome to the Thyroid Fixer podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Amy, and we're diving deep into the world of hormones, especially for all you fierce women in perimenopause and menopause, and anyone dealing with hypothyroidism. If you're struggling with weight gain, you feel like shedding those pounds is an impossible feat. If you're dealing with plummeting energy levels, gut-wrenching fatigue, or a libido that seems to have left town, then you're in the right place. And don't even get me started on the hair loss. If these symptoms are sounding all too familiar, you found your tribe. Welcome, because my goal is to educate, empower, and shake up your world. I want you to embrace every inch of that badass woman that you truly are. So if you're ready to dive in and fix things, let's get started. Let's talk about aging and how to age better. Research suggests that a big contributor to poor aging is senescent cells, better known as zombie cells. They're old, worn-out cells that can linger in your body after their useful function, wasting your energy and nutritional resources on them. As we age, senescent cells often accumulate in our bodies, contributing to sluggish energy, less flexibility, slower workout recovery, or simply put, the middle-aged feeling. But in the last 10 years, research has come out that has identified plant-derived ingredients, which can actually help our bodies naturally eliminate these zombie senescent cells. These ingredients are called senolytics. The easiest way to get complete senolytic support is a formula I love called Qualia Senolytic. It's almost like a monthly cleanse for aging. You take Qualia Senolytic just 2 days a month, and it's loaded with science-backed vegan senolytic ingredients that help your body naturally eliminate the zombie cells. It can literally help your body feel 10 years younger in just a couple months. I've been doing it the last few months, and I'm just happy that I'm doing it. I know I'm doing a good thing for my body. So you want to go to neurohacker.com/thyroid to try senolytic with a 100-day money-back guarantee. You can't beat that. And the code thyroid will also get you 15% off your first order. So that's neurohacker.com, neurohacker.com/thyroid, THYROID, for Qualia Senolytic. And remember the code thyroid for 15% off to start aging better. Did you ever come home from a really long day? Your energy's drained and you just want to sit down and watch Netflix and eat a good dinner, but you got to still squeeze in your workout. So how about if you actually got home at 7 and your workout was done by 7:05? Does that blow your mind? You're already done. You're unwinding. That's the reality with Carol Bike. In just 5 minutes, you experience a workout that is scientifically proven to be as effective as a 45-minute run. Carol isn't just a time saver, it's your literal shortcut to health, happiness, better muscles, lower body fat, leaving you more time for what actually matters in life, like watching Netflix and eating a great dinner. So if you want to check out Carol Bike, they give you a warranty, a trial period that is unmatched. You'll even come get it if you don't like it. 30 days. I mean, who can even beat that? So check it out. Go to carolbike.com, carolbike.com. You're going to use the code Dr. Amy if you grab one of these bad boys, which I highly recommend doing. You're going to use the code Dr. Amy. That is going to save you $100 off. And again, there's no risk. There's no risk. Try it for 30 days. If you don't like it, they will come pick it up. But I guarantee you, the time-saving aspect, the muscle-building aspect, the fat-burning aspect, you're just going to love it. I have been just so excited for this interview. You have no idea. And we're going to release this interview pretty much right away because of my excitement around it. And this is something that I know that you all have been dying for me to dive into. Well, I haven't been able to because I haven't had an expert in my circle until now. And then I met Caitlyn Hartigan and we started talking. We started talking about thyroid. We started talking about iron. And it turns out she has this kick-ass Facebook group called the Iron Protocol. And she has developed the Iron Protocol. Basically, I mean, hundreds of hours, maybe thousands of hours. She's in the process of writing a book/textbook. Am I right on that, Caitlin? Right?
It's arguably a textbook that will have the iron protocol in it. Yes.
But can be used by anyone. And you know, as we know, I mean, so many, and I'm going to ask you this as the expert, but what I see in my practice, so many patients have low ferritin, have the symptoms of anemia or just, you know, low iron in general that you're going to clarify for us today. So many of them are confused as to what the optimal range should be. I have a ton of questions around that for you. And really, I mean, from your own personal journey, it can really affect your health and your quality of life on a day-to-day basis. So that's why I'm so passionate about diving into this with you. So, hey, welcome.
Much. Thank you for having me, because this is a big problem we're seeing globally. So I appreciate the opportunity to help spread the advocacy of iron deficiency with or without anemia.
Yep, absolutely. So start with your story. What made you dive into all of this iron stuff and start a group and develop the iron protocol?
I started becoming unwell after puberty with extreme fatigue in the least. And I think most of us in that situation, when we're a teenager, we don't know how to verbalize what's going on with us. And we don't know if it's abnormal, because we know teenagers are tired. They're going through puberty. So my parents didn't live in this Google age where they could kind of dive in. I'm 34 now. So, you know, the internet was kind of new at that point, and you don't know if you can trust it or whatnot. So I started having fatigue and just going downhill with my health, my hair not growing, emotional. But you would kind of think, they're going through puberty, your hormones are going out of whack, you know, that's expected. But as I got into college and into my 20s, I kept going to my doctors and asking them for help. You know, hey, I think something's wrong with me. I'm having to nap all the time. I'm missing out on social opportunities, social engagements, and opportunities for career. The brain fog that set in throughout high school, the memory issues. You know, I could study something very well, but not remember the technical name for it. And I would miss that on the test. And I would be so upset, you know, because I studied so hard, or just missing something, even though I could talk about the topic. So there were a lot of struggles involved. And I would go to my doctors in my 20s throughout college and say, hey, I think something's going on. And they would constantly just say, oh, well, you know, your labs are fine. Your labs are normal. You're fine.
Right.
And it's intimidating talking with doctors. Even still, with how much experience I have now, I still get intimidated. And you don't want to be insulting either to a doctor, because we're under this impression they went to school for this. They know what they're talking about. And they're supposed to be, I'm paying them to help me. I continued to be so fatigued and a level of lethargy that was completely impeding on my life. You know, I knew I couldn't go to school in college for certain things that I was interested in, because I figured that the schooling would be too hard and I wouldn't be able to keep up because of my brain fog, and wouldn't be able to memorize and recall and retain. So just after years of being told I was normal on my labs, finally around 24, I said, well, you need to do other labs because this is a problem. Oh, you're probably just depressed. Oh, you probably just have anxiety. So I've tried tons of different antidepressants, anti-anxiety, even though I told them I don't feel like I'm depressed. I can get depressed if something, you know, depressing happens. And of course, none of them ever worked. And it wasn't until I ended up in the minor emergency from too many Red Bulls and 5-hour energies. I was having to rely on that. And then I got stimulants, but I was having to rely on that to get up out of bed in the morning. And I was thanking God for it so I could go to work and keep a roof over my head. But I knew it was revving up my system too hard. Anyway.
We do what we have to do, really, like to just,
And we're all trying to survive. And especially if we're crying to doctors for years and just being told, you know, it's psychological and that we're fine. So finally I had the gall around 24 or so to say, well, you need to do other tests because I'm telling you something's wrong with me. And then I ended up looking at outside sources, and I ended up in an adrenal fatigue support group on Facebook and pled desperately for help and showing my lab markers. And they said, I don't think you have what we would consider adrenal fatigue. I think you're iron deficient. And I think I said, well, I asked him for iron blood work and it all came back normal. They said, you need your ferritin checked. You need your ferritin checked. And so I learned about that and that it's the storage of your iron, which we can go into, but it took me 3 or 4 tries with my doctor to even get that tested. He said, oh, it's just the storage. It doesn't do anything. Oh, it's just the storage. It doesn't do anything. And I said, look, I don't care whether or not my insurance pays for it. I'm desperate. I'm young. I'm starting my life. I know I'm in the right place at the right time for my career, and I can't do anything physically. I need everything possible tested. I don't care if you keep saying, oh, that's rare. I obviously need it tested because I'm missing out on my life. So he finally got it tested and it was below the range just by 1 unit. And he said, oh, it's probably just your Adderall. I said, can Adderall do that? And he said, yeah, sure. Which to this date, I've never seen proven that there's any correlation like that where it can cause a false low. So anyway, that started me deep diving into iron and ferritin, but I was so unwell. It actually took me 3 years before hearing that from a gentleman, oh, test your ferritin. And then I reposted and they said, yeah, it's way too low. And they said, take ferrous sulfate 3 times a day with some vitamin C. Even just that helped me so much, even though there are more optimal ways to take it, which we'll go over. But even just that, and I was so unwell with the brain fatigue and physical fatigue, I actually didn't start taking iron until 3 years later. So that's how it started. And I joined all of the iron deficiency group and read every single post and read every single comment and started picking up on different trends and started analyzing that and started matching that and pairing that up with what I was actually reading in studies and that I had access to and published articles that I had access to. So anytime somebody said, oh, do this, or it means this, you can't just trust anyone on the internet just because they sound like they know what they're talking about. So I would go deep dive and go down that rabbit hole and try to confirm it with multiple studies or published articles. So it became a hyperfixation where I would, after work, I would spend 5 to 7, maybe 8 hours a night, just stuck in my recliner, just hyperfocused all weekend. So that's how it started. And then I was active within those groups and then ended up starting my own group and people followed from there. So that's how it started. So that's the background is a hyper fixation of analyzing mass real-time data and then pairing it and comparing it with studies and published articles.
I love that. And now your group is 120 some thousand strong. Ironically, in my Girl Fix Your Thyroid group, I just saw in the last couple of days someone posting your group as a reference, like, hey, you go join this group because your ferritin is low. I'm like, I love it.
And thank you for allowing that, because there's a problem where a lot of folks get those comments removed or they get banned for linking other sources. So we in our group, we like to be a resource for resources. So we allow everyone to talk about their full health and even just ask questions that are unrelated to iron so that maybe someone can provide and share their personal experience or maybe a resource that they found helpful. So thank you for helping others by allowing people to, post resources.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love it. I love it. So it sounds like to me, just to kind of summarize even your story and for the listeners, that there are a variety of different symptoms that correlate with having low ferritin. And everything that I've studied really kind of showed that low ferritin can almost overlap hypothyroidism. So even weight gain can be correlated with low ferritin. Obviously, you mentioned the extreme fatigue, depression, brain fog. What else am I missing? Or is it just kind of like all of the hypothyroid symptoms? Yeah, just check all those boxes for low ferritin too.
Right. And there are different nutritional deficiencies that have maybe 90% of the same symptoms as well, because they're in a lot of common biochemical processes, but low ferritin can cause hypothyroidism. Why hypothyroidism can have all of the same symptoms as iron deficiency as well, because it's very common and expected for anyone with iron deficiency to have subclinical hypothyroidism, which I had, or to have full-blown hypothyroidism. Definitely overlapping, definitely similarities for a reason too.
Well, so you mentioned that hypothyroidism can cause low ferritin can cause hypothyroidism, vice versa. I see it all the time on my patients' labs. So who is at risk outside of thyroid patients for iron deficiency?
So women and children are extreme high risk, especially a woman who's ever had a pregnancy. But women and children in general, women have a monthly bleed, and growing a fetus requires iron for growth and development. So it drains the mother. And children are growing constantly, and iron's required for growth and development. So they can use up all of their iron. And something we normally refer to as growing pains can easily be an iron deficiency, or a vitamin D deficiency, or B12 deficiency, among many other possible deficiencies. But it's quite amazing that some sufferings that we've normalized can be something we can actually tend to and not have to suffer through it.
Yeah, exactly. And be educated like we are educating people today.
Right.
I mean, I think as soon as you can't unknow. It's like you can't unsee it, right? So as soon as you hear this conversation, it's going to be stuck in your head, and you're going to start thinking about your blood labs, and did they even test ferritin, or did they just do a normal iron panel? And this is really going to hit home with a lot of people.
Oh, so women and children are at high risk, and there are tons of different causes. So if you're on a PPI long term, you're at high risk, since that helps with malabsorption. All sorts of other causes, but men are at high risk for it being high. But we have plenty of men in our group as well. Iron deficiency is not something that only happens to women. It's not something that only happens to premenopausal women. We have plenty of menopausal women in our group. And since men are at high risk, and they may have something going on with them that causes malabsorption, or some sort of bleed, or something else in the long list of causes we have in our group protocol, we really want to advocate. I want to make sure I point this out. We really want to advocate that everyone needs their ferritin checked every year, and they need to know their number. And we'll go over optimal numbers and how iron deficiency is diagnosed, I'm sure, but I just want to make sure I make it clear. Women and children are at high risk. Pregnant women, or ones that have been pregnant before, are at extreme high risk, but men are at risk for it being high. So it's just very, very important to always get your ferritin checked.
Yeah. Yeah. Get it checked every single time, every time. That way you can see a trend, because I've also seen it where maybe we tested someone and they were okay, low, but not crazy, somewhere in the middle, almost optimal, but not really. And then we test them again and it plummeted. So, and we'll talk about the different causes but yeah, I mean, I think it's important to get it checked a couple times a year. Now, you are saying iron deficiency, and we always hear anemia. And I kind of I think myself and most people interchange those terms, but are they different?
They're very different.
Okay.
We actually can't use the terms interchangeably because they have two different meanings.
Okay.
So, which is important to know, because there is iron deficiency with anemia, or there's iron deficiency without anemia. Either way, the iron deficiency alone, without it ever developing into anemia, can completely ruin your life and make you bedridden, make you lose your job, make you unable to tend to your kids, your household. So it can completely ruin your life. So there is a difference. I think this is one of the biggest learning curves that's important to go over right away. So I'm glad going over it. So anemia has a technical definition of insufficient red blood cells. So you would be looking at your CBC, your complete blood count, or your full blood count panel, and you would look at any of those red blood cell markers to indicate an insufficiency. So most commonly it's low hemoglobin, low RBCs, something like that, maybe misshapen or too small of red blood cells. So that would be anemia. Anemia has tons of causes. So iron deficiency is one of them, but it's the most common and prevalent. So we've actually seen a couple of people that have been diagnosed anemic by their doctors and put on iron right away without having their iron checked, which can be really harmful. You don't want too much of anything, so you want to check your iron. But there's also other causes of anemia. It can be genetically related, it can be incidental, an incident related. It can be from low folate, low B12, low B6, low copper, low zinc. It could be any of those things. So we've even seen a lot of women in our group, because the doctor didn't want, there's this fear mongering for iron. The doctor didn't want to put them on iron, so they put them on folate pills, which makes their iron deficiency worse, because it's putting more of that to work.
Right.
So anemia is one thing, whereas you would be looking at your complete blood count to look at that. So if you're anemic, You're going to see that in your blood panel and your red blood cell work. Now, what's the cause? A great thing to do right away is check your ferritin level. So, because that's the most common reason is iron deficiency. So, iron deficiency is completely different. You have to look at your iron markers. So, there are several different iron markers. There's an iron panel. Most everywhere in the United States, the iron panel includes iron serum, TIBC, and percent saturation.
Mhm.
I know Australia also includes ferritin, but most countries don't include ferritin. It's a completely different test, so you need to make sure you request it. So
Right.
iron serum, we typically find for most people, even in a severe deficiency, you have normal iron in your blood because it's so important to make sure that your bone marrow has enough iron to
Mhm.
create red blood cells. So your body will prioritize sending iron to your bone marrow. It's really neat, like it's a smart AI situation. Your body will choose, and if it's realizing you're not having enough iron that day, what will happen is the storage of your iron, which is ferritin, the ferritin will release the iron for you to use, and it will put it in the serum so that it's always normal, so that you're alive and there's always enough iron for your most critical need, which is the bone marrow.
Mhm.
So it will, even if it starts running out of iron too much in your ferritin, it will pull iron out of your hair and your nails.
Oh,
It
okay.
will
That's why we
pull,
have the hair loss with the low ferritin too. Hmm.
that's one of the reasons for the hair loss. Yeah. So it will do anything possible to make sure that that iron serum is in normal range on your blood work in your body. So to just look at iron serum, your iron panel with your iron serum, your percent saturation, your TIBC, it's erroneous.
Hmm.
You can't rely on your iron panel most of the time to be able to diagnose iron deficiency because it's typically going to be in normal range because your body is doing that. It will even pull iron out of its storage, out of its savings. So then we have the ferritin, which is the storage of iron. And I kind of like to explain it as though the ferritin is your savings account, like at your bank.
Hmm.
Let's say you have enough money in your wallet or your debit card to do all of your daily needs, like pay your gas and your rent and your food. Let's say your wallet's maxed out with all of that. It may look full and like you have enough for what you need, but your savings account only has $5 in it. What are you going to do as a human being? You're probably going to freak out and
Right.
say, oh my God, I need to ration my money right now. I need to budget very, very well, and I need to go looking for more money. I need to
Hmm.
figure out how I can spend less and I need to make more. Your body does the same thing. So it will actually increase its ability to absorb. It will increase, it will show an increased number of transporters. It's called transferrin that will grab your iron. So it's very important to understand the dynamics that it's kind of this, it's basically the same thing as you with your savings account and the cash in your wallet. So iron serum is the cash in your wallet. So it doesn't make sense if you want a full assessment of what's actually going on with your iron status to only look at iron serum. So it makes sense. You also need to be looking at your ferritin. That's a couple of the iron markers. Now, to determine iron deficiency, yes, your iron serum can be low. That's iron deficiency. Your percent saturation, which is the number of your transporters currently bound to iron, taking it where it needs to go. If that's too low, that's not good. You're not getting all of your iron needs. And that's because you don't have enough iron in you usually. And if your ferritin is too low, or as you mentioned a moment ago, looking at the trends, if your ferritin's been dropping, that means you've been relying on your savings account, your storage. You don't ever want to be in a situation where you're relying on your savings, especially with your body, because it will put you in a compromised position. It's very interesting. It's cited diagnosed for iron deficiency include different possibilities like low iron serum, but that's usually until it's way, way late. You don't have much iron in your savings anymore. That's like a way late stage, but you can catch it much sooner than that. And your life can be ruined way much sooner before your iron serum goes down. So a clinical diagnostic standard among many different universities and hospitals is a ferritin under 100 and a saturation under 20. saturation under 20%. So any ferritin under 100 can cause you symptoms. So we have some people in the group that are at an 85, are at a 60, and they're finding improvement by raising their ferritin higher. And there are some people that have a ferritin of 80 or 60, and they say they feel fine. So it could go either way. Everyone's different. Now, what's really, really cool is the American Gastro Association, Gastroenterology Association, the AGA, they create their own diagnostic standards. If a ferritin is 45 and below, and if you're anemic, you're iron deficient anemic. But what I appreciate even more, because so many of us have this and we keep being told we're fine when we're not, there's a study that's been done on bone marrow. And they found if the ferritin is 30 and below, you definitely have insufficient iron in your bone marrow. So they have labeled it, quote unquote, an absolute iron deficiency. So if your ferritin is 30 or below, you have an absolute iron deficiency. You don't have to look anywhere else to know whether or not you're iron deficient. You are absolutely iron deficient.
Well, that is progress. At least somebody is recognizing, but we know even if you're 40, 45, 50, maybe even 60, and like you said, maybe even 85, you could still be suffering in there. So, yay that they're actually recognizing a ferritin under 30, but man, we need more progress. And we're probably not going to get it. It's going to take people like yourself giving this message and training individuals on where they should be to really get people to wake up. Yeah.
Now, what we have seen in British Columbia, at one point, they had their lab range built out where it was, for example, 100 to 75 was possible iron deficiency, and 75 to 100 was probable iron deficiency. So that was really cool how they broke it like that, because that's a lot more accurate than right now, because right now the typical lab range starts around a 10, could be 15, could be a 9. I've seen as low as a 5, which is horrific. So this is a big learning curve. One of the biggest problems we have for people who feel like they're iron deficient and they're getting it tested, and a big problem for doctors, is they're typically looking at the lab range, which usually is a glorified average of around 2,000 to 4,000 people.
Yeah, that are all sick. Yeah.
Yeah, outliers taken out and one standard deviation for the mean. So it's a glorified average, not necessarily it's not what science and doctors have deemed the healthy range, what you want to be in. So that's a huge takeaway that I think most people find as a beginning learning curve. They don't realize for these nutritional markers, most of the time the lab is not, we call it normal range. It's an average, but it's not a healthy range per se. So typically the lab ranges start way too low, around 5, 8, 10, 15, but a clinical absolute iron deficiency starts at 30 and below. So we've got millions of us in the world crying to our doctors, oh my God, I've looked it up. I'm telling you, I have every symptom of iron deficiency. I've tried everything you've wanted me to try, antidepressants, thyroid medications, whatever it may be. It's not working. I really think I'm iron deficient. And then they come back with a ferritin of 12. And because it's within the normal range, the doctor says, no, you're fine, you're fine. And they continue suffering for years, maybe decades, until they find my group usually, which is what we're hearing. Or they're lucky enough to find a doctor who believes it should be much, much higher, which is we're finding is very, very rare, but we're appreciative that there's some, but it might be 1% of all doctors if we're lucky.
So school me a little bit on the ferritin. So my rule of thumb has always been, and I'm going to change this. I do change my optimal lab value ranges when I talk to experts. So in past conversations with testosterone, I used to say, well, total testosterone for a woman above a 40. Then I spoke with Anthony J, who's like, I really like my testosterone around a 50 for ladies. I'm like, okay, 50 it is. Boom, changed. So talk to me about ferritin. I've always said really kind of 80 to 100, especially if you do have hypothyroidism or Hashimoto's, is that sweet spot. But there are times, or part of the iron protocol, where you're talking about keeping that ferritin above 100 for a number of months. And I want you to explain the why behind that, but start with the optimal, where you like optimal ferritin.
So there's two different concepts: optimal for long-term health and how everyone's operating versus optimal for recovering from iron deficiency.
Okay.
So the goal of the iron protocol is for you to find your optimal ferritin, and of course your other iron markers, but find your optimal ferritin because what's happening is the body is making decisions based on what's in storage. So you want it to feel that there's enough iron and it doesn't have to budget and ratchet where it's sending it. So we say you need to find your optimal ferritin for recovery and maintain it for at least 6 months. That's what we usually see most people need. And it's typically going to be minimally 125 for recovery.
Okay.
So these are generic terms and a generic goal. Could someone feel optimal going from a 60 to an 80 or 60 to 100 and not reach that 125? Sure, that could be possible. We've definitely seen that anything is possible. But for the majority of people, we have seen most people need to be well over 125 for more than 6 months and maintain it there steadily, because you have to convince your body it no longer needs to ration and freak out, be in this starvation mode of iron, not sending it everywhere it needs to go. So typically your optimal for recovery, your optimal ferritin for recovery is going to be dependent upon how long you've been iron deficient and what other co-conditions, deficiencies you may have. So I was deficient for over 15 years based on my symptoms. Of course, ferritin was never tested prior. So based on my symptoms, I've been deficient for over 15 years, and I had low end vitamin D the whole time, among little to no progesterone. So I actually just had to maintain over the last 4 years. I had to maintain my ferritin in between 250 and 300. Otherwise, and that's with optimal vitamin D and working on all of my other nutritional and mineral, vitamin and mineral markers, and trying to making sure everything is optimal and or at least within normal range and working on it. So I spent the last 4 years and I had to maintain it in between 250 and 300. And if it dropped below 250, my restless leg syndrome came back right away. So that's how I knew, hey, my iron deficiency symptoms are coming back right away. I need to go check my ferritin and figure out what my marker is.
Oh my gosh. Okay. You have to pause there, because most of the time a ferritin level that high would have doctors freaking out. I mean, even in the functional community, we'd be like, go donate blood, get it down. It's an inflammatory marker.
So
you're saying 250.
Yeah. So yes, low ferritin means you're iron deficient. And if you're under 100, you could have iron deficiency symptoms. There's a bit of a challenge for practitioners because ferritin is also an acute phase reactant that can react in the presence of inflammation, infections, obesity, hyperthyroidism, fatty liver, and any malignancies. And we've even seen it be a false high. We call it a false high in its context, because it really is that high. It's just a false high in regards to using it as an iron marker, because you can't use it as an iron marker if it's falsely elevated.
Mm-hmm.
We've even seen a false high be as high as only 40 units higher than what it really was. But somebody could have all of the iron deficiency symptoms and go get their ferritin tested, and it could be 100 or 200 or 300, and they might think, oh, I'm fine. But in reality, once they tend to whatever is causing that false high, like getting rid of the infection, getting rid of the inflammation, for example, and then they retest their ferritin, it could be a 5. It could be a 3. So we do see this as a big problem where a lot of people with these conditions are not being diagnosed and treated for their iron deficiency because it's falsely elevated and it's masking. So especially the reason why most doctors would freak out if it's 250 is because they're thinking it's inflammation, because most menstruating women, most women in general, don't have a 250 on their own or 200 on their own, because we're constantly losing our iron. So it's kind of that you pointed that out, because it validates. And we hear this all the time from members in our group, oh, my doctor says it's normal for a woman to have a 40, or they've never seen it higher than a 50. And it's like, yeah, because we're all iron deficient.
Right,
so,
exactly.
And we don't believe everyone's iron deficient. It just so happens, because of the causes, most of us are. The statistics are. Some sources say 80% of people on the planet are iron deficient. Some sources say 80% of women. So especially because with the diet we have, the iron is often paired with something that blocks iron absorption. So yes, if somebody comes back with a 250, your doctor may say, hey, you're fine. Or your doctor may say, you might have inflammation or fatty liver, or they might say, oh my God, that's too much. You need to donate. I actually have the iron overload, hemochromatosis gene mutations, which makes me clinically highly likely to overload.
Okay.
So I go down that rabbit hole as well, because I was misdiagnosed with it too at one point, just for eating before my labs.
Okay.
So that's really important to understand as well. That we can talk about iron overload later, or might even be another time. But iron overload, typically most doctors, from what I've seen and multiple publications, a lot of times they aren't necessarily worried about iron overload until it's 700 or above. Much, much higher. A lot of ranges end around 300, 350, 400.
I have seen that. I have seen that higher cap on ferritin ranges before.
Sometimes, sadly, I've seen a couple end at 150.
Yep.
Which is really sad. That means the average is much lower and it's pulling it down. That means most of those people are very iron deficient and suffering, and they probably won't ever get diagnosed. Yes, sometimes a lot of doctors would say that's even too high, but a lot of them would say, you're within the normal range, because a lot of times 250 or 300 is within the normal range. But yeah, you want to understand how ferritin works and how the iron panel works, because you could be misdiagnosed with too much iron like myself. Or you can use the ferritin marker. It's such a useful marker. We believe everyone needs to get it tested every year for iron needs. And because what if it's falsely elevated? You could have inflammation. You could use it as a potential inflammation marker. Fatty liver, things like that. It's a super incredibly important marker. But yeah, 250 is not necessarily too high, because ferritin is the safe storage of iron. Iron has to be bound. It's a clinical and technical term, bound. So this iron is bound inside the protein ferritin. So it's safe, just like your iron and your hemoglobin is bound to protein hemoglobin. So ferritin is the safe storage of iron. So it's not doing anything around 250 in some detrimental way. It's sitting there safely. That's the purpose of ferritin, is to have a safe storage. Now, if it was 700, that's usually too high.
Okay. Then that's definitely considered too high. So if someone does come back, even really with a 250 or a 300 out of the blue, but they still have all of the symptoms that correlate with iron deficiency, when should they go check it again, just to see, like you said, it could be 250 and then a 5.
Right.
How long do they need in between those tests?
It just depends on if you're tending to whatever's causing it. For example, COVID causes inflammation, and it uses up a lot of our nutrients and minerals. So most of the time, if somebody's getting it tested right when they have COVID, right after when they have COVID, their ferritin typically comes back really high, and it's because of the inflammation.
Yeah.
So we get this question in our group, well, when do I retest? Whenever you think the inflammation's down. I'm not sure. I'm not an inflammation expert. It is important, if you do have a higher ferritin number and you do think you have most of the iron deficiency symptoms, or even some of them, because they don't all manifest in everyone. We all have something different going on. So it is important to vet out fatty liver, hyperthyroidism, any inflammation. It's important to vet those out, because you could be having those going on, and then you can tend to those. And when you think you fully tended to them, or you even want to check if that's part of your monitoring in progress, yeah, you can see if it's dropped for sure.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Beautiful.
Now,
I'm always looking for the best products to partner up with to support the podcast and to give you guys really cool stuff that you can do and implement. So I recently partnered with Jasper, the world's best air purifier. And when I was thinking about what should I read for this ad, Mike, who's the founder of Jasper, emailed asking how my Jasper experience was going. So this is the exact email I sent to him. Hi, Mike. When I first plugged in my Jasper, it instantly flagged the air quality in my house was poor, showing red on its indicator. It was a bit of a shock, honestly, but within 3 hours, it worked its magic, improving the air quality to a healthy green status by removing particles from the air. What really blew me away was how it automatically amps up whenever I start cooking. I had no clue that just preparing meals could introduce so many particles into the air. And it's been enlightening and comforting to see Jasper kick into high gear to clean up as I cook. But here's the most fascinating part. After moving into our new house, my hair began turning orange, and I assumed it was the water. However, a visit from the water filtration experts unveiled that it was actually due to an airborne bacteria attracted to water and soap. Here's the kicker. Since moving Jasper closer to my bathroom and bedroom, my hair has stopped changing colors. I've ditched the harsh shampoos that I was using that just did nothing good for my hair, broke my hair. And Jasper's all I need now. It's not just an air cleaner. It's been a personal savior in ways I never expected. Just had to share this with you. Jasper has truly made a difference in my life. All the best, Dr. Amy. Mike replied to my email saying, that's the ad. Don't change a thing. And Jasper is giving an amazing discount to my listeners. So if you use the code Dr. Amy, DRAMIE, you're going to save $100 off of any Jasper. You're going to go to jasper.co. Now you can go to jasper.co/Dr. Amy, but you want to use the code Dr. Amy at checkout so you can save some money. Do it. Let me know your experience. Email me with your experience.
Now, typically, from what I've seen in the different publications I've read, the doctors who are knowledgeable about this, that's why Dr. Soapy actually wrote an article that says it labeled as a common, a clinical challenge. That's one of his papers. It's called Diagnosing Iron Deficiency, a Clinical Challenge, because it can be hard in that context if it's falsely elevated. So what he says, what they do is they'll give iron and monitor your saturation, which we advocate for you to do anyway if you're taking iron anyway. And they assess, okay, are any of these alleviating? They still give them iron in that regard. Now, if it's an infection that feeds on iron, that's a different story. Those are things we go over in the group, and it's a personal choice. It can go either way.
So there are infections out there that can actually feed on iron. Would that then drop a person's iron, or would that person want to avoid addressing their low ferritin at that particular point of time because the infection is just going to eat it anyways, like a Pac-Man?
Right. There's H. pylori, which is known to feed on iron, which drops your ferritin usually. But if it's causing inflammation, it can cause it to be high. H. pylori, SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, COVID. Most people probably want to stop taking iron or not take iron yet because they want to tend to the actual problem and not feed it. But we've seen plenty of people in our group say, hey, I just got COVID. I'm going to try to take off my iron, refrain from iron. Does anybody else have any COVID tips? And then they'll come back and say, I am dying even worse because of my iron deficiency symptoms. So I'm going to take it, or I just started taking it last week and it's helping me even beat this. And then we also see hematologists and oncologists refer their cancer patients for iron infusions because they're depleted from the cancer feeding on it, but you need iron for your immune system to fight it. What we've seen is it can really go either way. We're not here to tell people to take iron, unless I've seen some folks who I'm like, you need a blood transfusion right now. You're dying so badly right now. Like, I actually will tell you, because I don't give medical advice. I'm not a medical professional. I'm an analyst, basically.
Yeah.
We don't tell people to take iron. Sometimes we'll tell them when not to, if it's very blatantly obvious it's making them worse, or they're in a position where they need to tend to something first. But it's definitely a personal choice when it comes to if there's something feeding on the iron. Do I take the iron because it might make it worse, or should I stop it? Do I take it because it's really a personal choice, and it might come down to trial and error for that person.
Okay. So yeah, let's keep that on the back burner of the iron infusions, because I want to circle back to that with some people that just don't respond to iron treatment.
Well, iron, yeah.
Right. So okay, so we talked optimal levels. Like you said, you have to reach that level where you feel your best. And I'm assuming that people just know. It's almost like there's a shift in their body where they go, okay, this is it. And then do you tell them to go retest so you can see where your iron is or your ferritin is in this moment in time where you're feeling good?
Right. Okay. And then especially if you start to feel worse after maybe you've adjusted your dose to taper off, or you stopped it, and then you want to go test right away because you want to see what your ferritin number is for your own benchmark.
Yeah.
But plenty of people, like I said, plenty of people feel fine at 80. Most people aren't going to. Most women aren't going to, based on what we've seen. I've maintained mine. I had to maintain mine around 250 to 300 for the last 4 years. Mm-hmm. Now I just retested. I'm at 178 and my restless leg syndrome is back. My brain fog's back a little bit. Losing track of my thought in the middle of speaking is a great example. A lot of ADD symptoms are also iron deficient symptoms. So I'm working on mine to probably shoot for around 200 I might need it there for a year, for 2 years. The thing with healing from iron deficiency, it takes a while for people to feel better, even if your numbers are more optimal.
Okay. Why is that? The body is just continuously trying to heal and repair from the years, if not decades, of being deficient.
Basically, from our understanding, it's still not convinced it's going to have a sufficient amount of iron for the bone marrow. So it's still freaking out.
Like a starvation response. Yeah.
Right.
It's holding on for dear life.
Because
Okay.
it's documented that your body will shut down different biochemical processes based on priority and most critical need. Hair, anxiety, brain fog, brittle nails, insomnia, all sorts of things, allergies, all sorts, even wounds healing. There's so many of them, and we have them listed in Guide 4 in the Iron Protocol guides. But it will reserve as much iron as possible for your bone marrow. Just because you get your numbers higher, it doesn't mean you're going to feel better right away. So that's another unique thing about iron, why we want to advocate so passionately about this, because it just sucks to deal with. Just because you get it higher, it doesn't mean you're going to feel better. You have to give it time to convince your body it no longer needs to ration and budget all of that iron. So that's a big deal. I didn't feel better for 6 months, and until some of my symptoms started returning slightly, the nausea, the hypermobility, the feeling like I was dying, the air hunger, feeling like I can't catch a breath.
Oh, is that a thing too? Okay. So that's tied
so
to
many that we all suffer with that can be attributed to so many other conditions as well. For example, like thyroid, but there's so many that we're dealing with that we just go to CVS or go to the pharmacy for something over the counter. We don't realize we don't have to suffer from that for the next several decades. It's something that could potentially be fixed.
Wow, this is so powerful. I'm blown away with all this information, and I'm thinking of patients as you're talking, and I'm going, oh my God, they stopped taking their iron when their ferritin hit like 80, and then it plummeted again. I was like, what happened? What'd you do? Oh, I stopped taking it. So this makes sense, and I'm so happy that you talked about the patience factor and the time factor. We are in a now society, instant gratification, and I tell this to my thyroid patients that progress is not linear and it takes time. It took you decades to get here. You're not going to get well in a month. So I'm very happy that you also put that in this conversation, because I think it's really important to drive home that point that you have to stick with it, and that it could take years to really heal from the iron deficiency.
Thankfully, it can take years depending on like we said, how long someone's been deficient and what other conditions they have going on. Thankfully, though, to actually raise the number with the iron protocol, you can do it much faster than before, and you can still be safe. We go over all of that within the protocol.
Okay.
But we still do have plenty of members that say, oh my God, is this a placebo effect? Because I've been having panic attacks every day, and I'm on day 3 of the protocol, and I have zero anxiety. And it's like a miracle cure for some people. So we definitely don't say, this is going to make you feel 100% and you're going to be bouncing around and you're going to feel so much better. So many things promise that, and then it doesn't help, especially people who are dealing with low ferritin, because we've gone down every other avenue, because ferritin's usually not checked. And if it is checked, it's interpreted incorrectly most of the time.
Right.
So we don't advocate and say that this is going to be your miracle cure. However, it is pretty entertaining and interesting that it can miraculously change your life in different ways. It can. I don't like to set up expectations that this is what you can expect.
Right.
But however, we do see really cool, miraculous things. One of the most surprising things I saw right away was hearing loss has gotten better.
Oh, interesting.
We had multiple women post about their hearing is improving. And we said, well, how did you figure that out? To one of them, one of the veterans in the group. And she said, my husband told me that he doesn't have to repeat himself so much. He's the one that told me, I think your hearing is getting better.
Nice. Very nice.
Yeah. So there is a time component, but it is pretty cool that sometimes some of these symptoms can be alleviated quickly. So we do see that. It's just, tell yourself, it's the reason I named it a protocol is because you have to take it seriously. Really, it's just a collection of information organized in a useful way so that you can make a protocol that works best for you.
So give me the Reader's Digest version of your protocol. Are you dosing the iron supplementation multiple times a day, just once a day? How high will you go, or have a person, I guess you could talk about your protocol, because you're not directly telling people, but you're helping them out.
We share that for non-heme iron, which is iron that's from plants or synthetic. For non-heme iron, the American Society of Hematology has up on their website that most people, to heal from iron deficiency and treat their iron deficiency, most people will require 2 to 5 times their weight, but their weight's in kilograms. So you have to convert your weight to kilograms, and then you multiply it by 2, and then you take your weight again and you multiply that by 5. So it's your weight times 2 and your weight times 5. And that's your calculated range for non-heme iron in total. Now, iron has to be transported safely within the body. Otherwise, it can deposit into your tissues and it can create disease, cancers. That's what toxic iron overload is. That's what iron overload is, hemochromatosis. So you want to make sure you're always safely transporting your iron. Now, that's where your percent saturation comes in. And for me to fully explain that, but it's within the guides, and we can always do another, because that's another, 10-minute, 5-minute tangent. But you want to make sure you're only taking as much as your body has the capacity for, and you don't want to push it to max capacity. So we actually go over in guide 3C to test the safety of your dose, which is actually a really cool absorption test as well. So you can take your dose before your blood draw. And for non-heme, usually most people can tolerate up to 150 milligrams of non-heme in one dose, somewhere around there.
Can you give me examples of non-heme so people know what you're talking? Is that like the ferrous?
Yeah, the iron bisglycinate that you have, the ferrous sulfate, which is typically the one that doctors prescribe. And all of these irons are available over the counter. The prescription one is no better than over the counter. There's nothing in it that makes it superior in any way. There's ferrous salts, ferrous sulfate, ferrous gluconate, ferrous fumarate. All of the ferrous salts are notoriously harsh on the GI. It's documented that they can cause stomach lacerations. So a lot of people already have GI issues, and they're coming in droves into these groups or crying to their doctors and saying, I can't take iron, it makes me sick. I can't take iron, it makes me sick. Well, did you know there's a ton of options? There's a lot of options. Not every country has access to all of them, but in the US, UK, there's a good amount of options too. But ferrous salts are typically very affordable. In the UK, some people were showing a whole box of ferrous sulfate and gluconate they were able to buy for £3. So it's very affordable and accessible in a lot of countries, but most people can't tolerate it.
Okay.
So we have a problem with people saying, oh, I've been anemic my whole life. Oh, I've been iron deficient my whole life, but I get sick from the iron, so I just can't take it. So there's also the iron bisglycinate, which is tolerated by a lot of people. However, a lot of people can't tolerate glycine. And it also has a great absorption rate. All of these irons work, has a great absorption rate as well. We've even had one woman, though, her iron saturation was getting towards max capacity in the 90%. It was like 90%, 95%, something like that. I can't remember. And she was only on 50 milligrams of iron bisglycinate. So that's an issue, which is a whole other topic.
That's another topic. Yeah. Okay.
But guide 3C, we go over testing the safety of your dose, and you could take your dose 1 to 2 hours so that it's digested and your transferrin grabs it. And then you can see how many of your transporters are currently occupied and saturated with the iron, bound to it, driving it where it needs to go. Okay. So if it's too high towards max capacity, that dose is too high. So most people can tolerate 150 milligrams of non-heme. So there's the ferrous salts, iron bisglycinate, iron polysaccharide, iron complex. So there's a handful, and we go over those in guide 2A. Guide 2 treatments post, so to speak, chapter, and guide 2A goes over a lot of different options that are available. It's even got some links too, and some discount codes in there too. But there's a lot of different types of non-heme iron. Most people can tolerate up to 150 milligrams. Some people can't. So it's really important to test the safety of your dose. And if you are wondering if you have absorption problems, you can do that same test. And if your saturation comes back way too low and your iron serum comes back too low, then you're not absorbing it. You do have absorption problems. So that's really cool that it's useful that way too.
Now, what about vitamin C for absorption? I've always heard that you should take vitamin C when you're taking your iron supplementation.
So in the iron protocol, we spell out that for optimal absorption of non-heme iron, you want to take it on an empty stomach with at least 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C or lysine. It can work with vitamin C or lysine. Now, a much lower dose of vitamin C is still going to help the non-heme iron absorb, but we have seen consistently for most people that the more vitamin C they take, the more they absorb. So it's kind of the magic secret sauce of why it works. Most people are told by their doctors, here's some ferrous sulfate, take it once a day with orange juice. And a lot of the doctors will say, take it with food because it's so harsh on your stomach.
Right.
Most of your foods are going to block non-heme iron absorption. Milk with the calcium, manganese, zinc, copper. What else am I missing? Oh, magnesium. Pretty fun to see. That's one of the biggest takeaways we see in the group. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad I saw this post because I normally take my iron and my zinc together.
Right.
So just nuances like that, the protocol covers. So it's helpful, educational that way. So some people say, well, I can't tolerate it on an empty stomach. Well, that's a sign that your GI, something's going with your GI. So, you always want to tend to your root causes.
Yeah.
We have a list of causes in the protocol as well. And that's part of the protocol is to vet all of those out. So there's non-heme iron. So you want to take it on an empty stomach, which is usually 1 hour to 2 hours before, 1 hour before eating or 2 hours after, but nothing's competing with it. And you want to take it with 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C or lysine or more. If you take it with 250, it will help so much. If you take it with 500 milligrams of vitamin C, it will help it so much. There are different options of vitamin C as well. Some people say they can't tolerate certain options. There are different options, and we go over them in Guide 2A in the protocol as well. There are studies that say you can only absorb up to 250 milligrams of vitamin C, I've been told. And so some people say, well, that doesn't work because this study says you can only absorb 250. Okay, well then why do we see so many people that say they took it with that amount and they only had this, and then now they're taking it with 1,000? It's a completely different story. So vitamin C decreases hepcidin, and that's what we naturally raise throughout the day, and it blocks non-heme iron absorption. So the vitamin C and the lysine are a secret sauce. So there's non-heme, and then there's heme iron. Heme iron comes from animals. It's the heme. You can think of hemoglobin if you want to think of that. It comes from animal sources. So there are a couple of options for that. Most people, what we've seen from our own analysis, they require 1.5 to 2 milligrams per kilogram they weigh. In a day. Most people can tolerate up to 60 in one dose, but you still want to test the safety of your dose. So the smaller doses of iron, but multiple of them, the better and the safer, because you want to make sure your body can transport it safely. Heme iron doesn't get blocked by anything except for heavy dose calcium. So that's super convenient for people. And there's information in Guide 2A for that as well.
Now, what about the people that they're even trying both sources of iron, and sometimes they're even combining them. They're combining a non-heme and a heme, and they just can't get that ferritin up. What about iron infusions? What's your take on those?
I love iron infusions. I've had 3 of them.
Okay.
However, they come with risks. So we have a post in Guide 2 over infusions that goes over different risks, potential issues that can happen. But you ultimately want to make sure you're constantly digging for your cause of iron deficiency. So if the oral iron isn't working and you've retraced your steps throughout the protocol and you're taking iron as optimally as possible for absorption and it's still not working, you want to know why if you don't already know. And then there are some people who've had gastric bypass, different stomach surgeries, and so they don't absorb a lot of their nutrients and minerals, and they have to rely on iron infusions for the rest of their life. Iron infusions have come a long way. There was a YouTube episode I saw on a doctor who was advocating to his colleagues, stop prescribing oral iron for your patients because you keep saying there's so many risks with iron infusions, but if you look at the numbers, it's far safer than oral iron. Oral iron has a high likelihood for people to not tolerate it. We've seen stomach cramping. We've seen anxiety, heart racing, diarrhea, constipation. All of those things we do talk about within the group, and a lot of them have remedies and things to double check. Those can be signs of other things going on.
Mhm.
But right away in our expectations post in Guide 2, we say, the first thing we say is expect a very bumpy road. You could have horrible reactions. We've even seen some people, I saw one woman end up in the hospital, but she thinks it was because of the methyl B vitamins that was included in the iron supplement.
Oh,
But
okay.
anything can happen. Infusions can be absolutely life-saving. We see that most people do not get infusions when they desperately need it, when it's a life or death situation. We see a lot of people in our group have a ferritin of a 2 and a saturation of 5% and a hemoglobin of 8. And they're describing their symptoms where it feels like they're dying every day, that they have POTS. They are dizzy, they're out of breath, they can't do anything, and they're crying about it. And it's just absolutely life shattering and life ruining. And all of their freaking numbers say extremely iron deficient, needs attention now. And these doctors will not order an iron infusion. And then so I tell them, because they say, what should I say? What do I respond with? And sometimes I say, well, ask them, then what's an iron infusion made for?
Oh, that's good. I like that.
Who's supposed to be getting these iron infusions if not if not my numbers? Then what the hell is the point of an iron infusion?
Right.
If not me, because if you Google right now, what is ferritin, what is iron deficiency, most of the universities and medical associations will define it, quote unquote, as low iron stores. That means low ferritin, low iron stores, low iron storage. So we do see people who are in desperate, immediate, right now need for iron infusions not get it. And what's even worse is we do see people with a hemoglobin below 6, below 7, and they're dying, and their ferritin numbers in the toilet, their iron serum, their iron saturation's low, and the doctor won't give them a blood transfusion when they want it. So we do see a lot of malpractice going on. So it's upsetting. And if you join our group, you will see a lot of what you could call doctor bashing, but it's because it's a group. The only reason most of these people are here in this group is because they've been harmed by doctors and they had to resort to Facebook.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I see it in my group too. And I speak openly about endocrinologists that, I mean, you're not going to get help there at all. Don't even waste your time for Hashimoto's or hypothyroidism. So I get it. It's not bashing, but it just is. It just is.
Say not bashing, but some people come in, they've got anxiety from the iron deficiency, and they're like, I don't really appreciate all this doctor bashing. And we've had a couple of medical professionals come in and not appreciate it. And I said, it's actually a rule to take yourself out of the equation and be objective and not take anything personally. But I like to forewarn that there is a lot of medically traumatized and harmed people. Yeah. Because we want more doctors and medical professionals and healthcare professionals in the group, and we have a lot. So we appreciate when they understand. We're not talking about all of them. We know some really good ones exist. It's just, I've been looking for them for over 10 years. I have yet to find one that has ever understood iron deficiency. And some people will say, oh, you need a new doctor, just go to another doctor. Well, I'm on year 10.
Yeah.
And I'm in Dallas. I'm in a metroplex. I'm in one of the most amazing spots in the world with opportunities and competition for doctors. So anyway, back to infusions. It is such a blessing to have one ordered when you need one. However, I like to remind everyone and advocate, it's still a personal choice. It's totally a personal choice. There's risk of anaphylaxis, which is very, very low, very, very low. And the infusion center that you get it in has nurses and people equipped for that if it were to happen. You can also ask for a very slow drip. So in case you have some sort of reaction in the moment, you can catch it. And there are some other risks, very important risks that you can actually help minimize if you go to the infusions post in Guide 2. Okay. So infusions are great. You can do the iron protocol with infusions by using the information in the iron protocol and maintaining your ferritin at a healthy, recovering way for yourself too. So infusions can be really great.
It's just hard to get. Like you said, you can't just go get an infusion on your own. Yeah.
It can be hard to get. So keep trying, keep advocating, keep asking questions in the group. We have a Google Doc of doctors that our members have added to it that take ferritin more seriously, because usually a doctor says, it's just storage, it doesn't do anything, which I understand. Think that, but the body makes decisions based on what's in storage. But for infusions, keep educating yourself. We've got resources within the group. Keep asking within the group. We have group members. We have one group member who owns a hospital in India, and she had me speak at her midwives conference, and her daily seizures ended within 90 minutes of her iron infusion. And she had been suffering long-term from her seizures and didn't want to go near iron because her iron serum was fine, her iron panel was fine, and iron is so fear-mongered. Well, too much iron is bad. So is too much water. So is too much of anything. That's what too much means. So thankfully, with iron, we actually have a way of best understanding how much too much is. And that's what we touched on with the high percentage saturation, and it's gone over in guide 3.
Okay.
But infusion can be life-changing. Injectifer has the highest incidence rating of hypophosphatemia, of low phosphate, which it feels like your life is over. It can take 6 months or even longer to heal from. So at this point, Injectifer, I had Injectifer and I was fine. A lot of people are fine, but at this point, why risk it? If you're already feeling like you're dying from iron deficiency, you definitely want to compile on top of that. So for me, I just don't understand why not just go with a different one. There's other caveats too, but iron infusions they can be life-changing.
Wonderful. Absolutely. Okay. I'm glad you touched on that, because I do know some people that really need them. But like you said, they're very hard to get. They're very hard to convince a doctor to write for it. So they're kind of left to go the route of supplementation. But I love how you're referring to, this section and that section in the iron protocol. This makes it so easy for people to join your group and go right there and read through the protocol. I mean, we're touching on it now. And I mean, even just from this interview alone, we're learning so much. I'm learning so much. The audience is learning so much, but they can even go deeper joining your group and going into the iron protocol.
And I thank you for that, because it can be so overwhelming when people join and they've got their brain fog from the deficiencies and any other conditions they have going on. And they say, oh my God, I'm overwhelmed. This is too much. But it is a self-help patient advocacy group.
Yeah.
So some people aren't ready for that, and they don't realize it's a self-help patient advocacy group. I do consults. You can PM me for a consult to help you create your own protocol, but I don't tell you what to put in your body. And some of us, and I was there for a long time, just tell me what to do. I'm just desperate to feel better. I get it. I was there.
Yeah.
So I purposely organized the guides so that like items are together. And, guide number 1 is the 5 steps of the protocol, which includes testing for all of your causes. And we usually see most people have more than one cause. And it's step by step. And I put a table of contents for each. So I understand how overwhelming it can be. Like, oh my gosh, there's all this information, I have to read it. All you have to do is worry about guide 1 preface. All you have to do is worry about guide 1 preface and focus on that and focus on that. And then when you're done with that, you'll go to guide 1, step 1.
It's one step at a time.
Tough. Yeah, it can be so tough because I've joined so many groups with my horrible health, and they're like, read the files, and they're completely discombobulated because the files aren't a great way to do that. Thankfully, we now have the guides, but a lot of groups have transitioned over to the guides. But some people will say, well, I just have so much brain fog and I can't retain everything. And it's like, well, that's okay. You're in the right spot for that. Most of us are like that from the iron deficiency, and you don't have to memorize all this. You can easily click back and open it back up.
Right.
So thanks for pointing that out, because I wanted to reiterate that that's a dynamic we definitely see of some people coming in and going, oh my God, now I got to read all this, and I've got little kids, and I've got to do this and do that, and I don't feel well. You're in the right place. It's okay.
You're not alone. Everybody's been there. Yeah.
So we understand if you can't read it right away.
Yeah.
But I even created a little cheat sheet, worksheet outline on guide 1 preface. A lot of people will print that out or write it out, and it helps you stay on track with just a handful of different points,
Hmm.
especially the main points. So if you are unwell, but you're desperate to learn about this and explore it, it was written for you. It was written for unwell people and to be able to understand it. It's in layman's terms. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a clinician. I'm not from the medical field, but it is just grouped information for you and then spelled out in layman's terms and cited. So a lot of the clinical support is found in the one file I uploaded in our files for you.
Yes. Okay. That's perfect.
So if you want the actual resources, it's there as well.
You make it so easy for people. I mean, I hope you are getting this book published and putting it out to the masses, because this is going to be a New York Times bestseller. I don't care if you label it a textbook or a regular old self-help book, but it is going to help, like, your goal and your whole story, a pain to purpose story, the classic example of somebody going through it themselves, figuring
Yeah.
it out, and then helping others with the knowledge that you've gotten from your own experience. So, I mean, you got to release this book like far and wide.
Yeah, we're excited. So
Yeah.
we will probably do a little bit added to the guides right now, but we'll probably continue to release volumes of added information.
Perfect. Before I let you go, and I don't know if we can cover this in the next like 10, 15 minutes or not, but let's do this, right?
Yeah.
So my audience now knows that I removed 3 total episodes from the 415 that we have right now. One of them was Dr. Alan Christensen, when he talked about low iodine. And you and I talked about this, off camera when we met last week. I won't remove an episode because I disagree with someone. I will remove an episode if it can cause harm.
Yeah.
And telling people to avoid iodine can cause harm.
Yeah.
After speaking to you and learning this, and just, I mean, I knew it gut feeling anyways, going into the other 2 interviews with Morley Robbins. And I tried to do those interviews and kind of counter, but hey, when I see someone with low ferritin, anecdotally, they feel like absolute garbage. So, and then, hey, when I raise someone's ferritin, they feel better. How about that? And it just didn't really get the message across, because I still see in my group multiple questions about, I listened to the podcast and I'm so confused. What do I do? Do I ignore my ferritin? And he's over here telling me ferritin doesn't matter. You can walk around a ferritin of a 1 and you're fine. And you know what? I took those down because they can cause harm. I love him. I think he's a great person, but we can't deliver messages that will cause harm. So can you please break down, even if we just stay on the concept of why saying no ferritin? I mean,
Yeah.
we don't want to lower our ferritin level to a 1. We do have to care about it.
It was only recently, relatively speaking, he changed his stance that a ferritin should be 0. So it's my understanding, after studying him, that he believes iron should be in circulation, which, when you say it that way, it sounds like that could make sense. But the truth of the matter is Morley seems to be so focused on iron overload and have experience, which is hemochromatosis, that you can have hemochromatosis from gene mutations or consuming too much iron. The words are interchangeable, hemochromatosis and iron overload, and he refers to it as toxic iron in your tissues that isn't testable, which is not true. There's several things he says that right off the bat, if you are experienced with iron deficiency, show that he's not experienced with iron deficiency at all. First of all, he uses the terms anemia and iron deficiency interchangeably. You can't do that, because most of the people who have their lives completely ruined by iron deficiency, they're
Not anemic. Yeah.
they're not anemic. There are lots of other needs for iron than just to feed the bone marrow. And a lot of doctors don't realize that. We've had lots of doctors tell our members, your hemoglobin's fine, so it doesn't matter. Your iron can be low. And it's like, oh my God, you went to school? Oh my God, I feel like a third grader would know that there's got to be more uses for iron than just that. So anyway, he doesn't realize that the body makes decisions based on what is in storage. I see this with a lot of people that take his master class and go on Instagram and tell people iron is bad for you, iron is bad for you. It's not that iron is bad for you. You need iron. Too much iron is bad.
Well, and it's very rare that we see too much iron. I mean, like you said, in hemochromatosis, yes, but it's very rare that somebody's going to take so much iron that it's going to be sky high.
Especially because when you're consuming it, you're typically pairing it with something that blocks its absorption, and they don't validate that. And Morley and his root cause protocol seem to be advocating for mineral balancing, which we do too. We advocate for everything in your body to be functioning optimally. Mineral balancing requires iron, balancing iron, in which you have to look at ferritin for that. So they don't do that. And I don't mean to sound too pointed, but I have a lot of people in my group. When you're iron deficient, it's very hard to take care of yourself because you can't typically think clearly because of the brain fog. And then you have anxiety on top of it. And if you see somebody online that seemingly sounds like they know what they're talking about, it sounds good, it sounds like it makes sense in that moment, it can be very confusing. So we get a lot of people in my group saying that as well. Well, now I'm hearing conflicting things. What's true? I don't know who to believe. This is so overwhelming. I just want to give up. I get it. I was there. That's why I spent the time to look at real life examples and analyze everyone's experiences by the thousands. Sadly, we have thousands of people in my group that were harmed by RCP and Morley's advocating. I myself got banned from his group for talking about ferritin or asking about it because they want to keep the conversation about root cause protocol specifically. But the problem is, well, when you say something inaccurate, like root cause protocol does a lot when it comes to iron, and somebody's trying to clarify it, they're gonna comment that, or they're gonna correct them. So it's been brought to Morley's attention and his consultant's attention lots of times that certain sentences they're saying are not facts, they're inaccurate. But the truth is, he speaks on the iron recycling system. That's a real thing. That's important. And you have to have optimal copper, magnesium, vitamin A, B vitamins, and lots of other things to safely transport your iron. So he likes to say, you're not really anemic. What he means is iron deficient. You just have iron dysregulation. So you just need to get that recycling system functioning. Well, how do you know they have a dysregulated iron recycling system? You haven't looked at any of their labs. And you're saying that blindly. You cannot do that. We have women who are hemorrhaging. We have women who are bleeding for months at a time and their doctors aren't doing anything. And you're going to tell me it's just because they have low copper and magnesium? How do you sleep at night? I don't know. You cannot do that because these women are suffering. They're dying. I hear from people. My wife died. She was found on the floor with a hemoglobin of 6. She died of anemia. You can look up CDC statistics of dying of iron deficiency anemia. I've been helping a father since December. His 14-year-old daughter was having about 35 to 50 fainting spells a day. And typically with iron deficiency, you feel faint and you black out, you see stars. If you bend over and you get back up, you feel faint. But a lot of us, most of the time, don't ever actually faint. Some of us do. It's not as common. This poor 14-year-old daughter, imagine your 14-year-old helpless, innocent daughter is fainting 35 to 50 times a day. He had to reschedule his first appointment with me, consult with me, because he was busy buying her a helmet.
Oh my God.
Falling on the floor, on a tile floor, and having a concussion or worse. This is a life or death serious. This is very serious. You cannot spread non-facts about iron. You cannot fearmonger iron. And we're not here saying everyone's deficient and you all have to be on iron or you all have to be on high doses. We have plenty of people feeling better in our group because they're on lower doses. That's fine. And there's a lot of nuances to what we've been talking about that we go over in the group. So if somebody's going to comment and say, oh, well, you didn't cover this, you didn't touch about that, and this is really important. You're probably right, but it's covered
in the group. Yeah, it's in the group.
We're already talking so long, and I could go on for days about it, but everybody else has other things to do. This is what I do full time. Imagine your daughter at 14, and this has actually been another consult of mine. His daughter was so poorly, and they did RCP instead, which advocates for blood donations. Even if your hemoglobin is fine, because blood donations, they don't check your ferritin. They typically only check your hemoglobin. So I had one consult where she fainted driving on the way home after blood donating because her ferritin was already so low. Imagine dying from that. I couldn't imagine putting someone in that position. This is very, very serious. Imagine your 14-year-old daughter fainting 30 to 50 times a day and because her hemoglobin's fine, you were convinced to go donate her blood, or for her to not take iron and for her to only take copper. Like I said earlier, we had a woman who was having daily seizures and they stopped within 90 minutes of the iron infusion.
Yeah.
So it's very, very important for us to advocate. Just because you don't have anemia doesn't mean your life can't be ruined and that your body is not in a compromised position, because it could be. You have heart risk factors, your hormones can be totally off. So the gentleman I helped with his 14-year-old daughter, immediately from putting her in the sunshine and taking some vitamin D and then being on my protocol, because he gives me updates every few weeks or so, within, I think it was the first week and a half, something like that. It was relatively very soon after. He said, I can't believe it. She's now only having 12 fainting spells a day. She should have donated blood instead and be on copper and magnesium instead. You can't assume what's going on with somebody's body. We don't know. You have to do the testing, and sometimes certain testing, you have to do a different type of testing. For example, especially in hormone and thyroid world, saliva testing perhaps, blood testing perhaps, hair tissue mineral analysis perhaps, certain testing, and you have to go about it the right way or the most accurate way. It's not safe to just fearmonger iron.
Right.
Too much iron is bad. And there is a recycling system and a transportation system. Morley's right about that there's a recycling system. But we can't assume that everybody's recycling systems are off.
Right.
Because that's not the case. Everybody's different. That's not the case. And we believe at the Iron Protocol, we come from a whole health approach where we believe all of your levels need to be in optimal range and your organs need to be working optimally, and your hormones and your thyroid, everything, you need to be in optimal. So everything matters. It doesn't take long to look at what they say to know right away that they're not familiar with iron deficiency.
So yeah, it's test, not guess. I mean, you have to test. You can't blanket statement anybody, and you can't blanket statement something that is 99% of the time not the case. So there's that. It's definitely a situation of doing more harm, and we need to get that message out.
Yeah, and we talk about copper and magnesium all day long in my group. Very important. It seems like everything's a cofactor of iron. It puts everything to work. Copper and magnesium, B vitamins, retinol, it's all very important.
Yeah.
But so is sufficient ferritin, and I don't think he is equipped to speak on that, as proven by the many people who are worsened because their ferritin has dropped. I've seen RCP work his program, root cause protocol, which really is not about you discovering root causes.
It's not really the root cause.
It's not really about the cause. They say they assume everyone has hemochromatosis, but they don't use that word. They use iron overload. It's very clear that they're not equipped to speak on iron deficiency. And because they're so fear-mongering iron, it's pointing the needle at the opposite end. And like I was saying, I've seen lots and lots of people do very, very well on RCP, which to me, after asking questions and analyzing their experiences, it's because they were lower in copper, lower in magnesium, lower in B vitamins and retinol, and they didn't have as low ferritin. So it can help, but let's not pose that somebody really isn't iron deficient, because you don't know that. Let's not tell people with iron deficiency that is proven upon hundreds of publications and sources of diagnostic standards. Let's not tell them to go donate blood, please.
Right.
I would appreciate that. A lot of my members would appreciate that. So I appreciate you doing your due diligence and not standing for something that could potentially harm someone.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I appreciate you teaching us about this. And I love that you have the group that people can jump into and learn so much more and really help themselves through the Iron Protocol. So we're obviously going to connect that group. We're going to link to that group in the show notes so people can just click it and go and join. But Caitlyn, tell people where else they can find you. And if they are interested in working one-on-one with you, like you said, to develop their own protocol, how they can.
Yeah. The Iron Protocol for iron deficiency with or without anemia is our group on Facebook. And we also have our page, the Iron Protocol. But you can message me on Facebook. You can message me on Instagram. We're also on Instagram at the Iron Protocol. I mainly do my work messaging, having it initiated via messaging. So we do that. We've got a TikTok and YouTube channel. Everything's at the Iron Protocol to make it easier, but soon we'll be making videos.
It's hard to diversify across all the platforms. It's time consuming. So
and we'll do it. Yeah, and we'll do it. But if you want to get in contact with me to help set up your protocol as well, you can contact me via Instagram or Facebook. And then we also have our website, theironprotocol.com, with different options there and also a connect button there. But if you want to make sure you reach me, go ahead and message me on Facebook. That's the easiest way.
Amazing.
Sure.
That is absolutely amazing. Well, Caitlyn, thank you so much for your time today. A lot of time, but we needed it to dive into this. I knew it when we scheduled. I'm like, it was going to be over an hour.
I know it might be
hanging in, everyone.
Yeah, I know it might be a lot for some folks, but hopefully you can at least just go directly to those places, or you can pause and come back to it. So thank you so much for having me and giving us the opportunity to spread awareness that iron deficiency without anemia is a serious thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely.